Hello everybody and welcome to part 4 of What If Midoriya Bonded with Venom. Well, this part is the last part of what I worked for We the Celestials, so it's the last of that, but still it's very different from that as I want to set up my own direction here. I'm starting to do it now, so you can see where it goes from here. If you are enjoying this series and want more, hit that like button, subscribe, and you can also check out my Discord. Link to that in the description below, where I talk to people and stuff. I mean, it's a fun little community. The video is already pretty long, so I'm just gonna say enjoy the video. A knocking sound was heard. "Come in," Colton Drake answered, sitting in his spacious office. He was checking his documents. He had a company to run, and as always, he was doing it pretty well. He was just getting everything sorted out for the next board of directors meeting. The door to the office opened and his assistant came in. "I hope it's important," he stated, saving the documents and closing the computer. "It's a status update from Dr. Garaki," the assistant said, keeping it short and to the point. "Report," Carlton said, urging the assistant to continue while turning around to face out the window, enjoying the view. "As you know, sir, the doctor agreed to the request to capture subject 1477. We have supplied him with some of the specimens. So far he seems to have gotten one successful match, although the data is problematic. Further bonding hasn't seemed to be possible. It seems the humanoid's quirk was to blame for the success," the assistant said, sweat dripping down his forehead. One misstep and he was done for. "Interesting. Still, no step forward is a bad step forward. Keep me informed of further progress. That'll be all for now," Carlton said, waving his assistant out of the room. He was surprised by the quick development the good doctor had, but was to be expected eventually. "Hey you! Can you tell us what it's like to work so closely with All Might?" a reporter asked as Midoriya arrived at school on a random day. News of All Might being a teacher at UA had spread, thus different members of the press gathered at UA's gates, wanting to get an exclusive. I'm sorry, I have to get to class. Yeah, right now, right away," Midoriya nervously answered, leaving as quickly as he could.
"Why did you run from them?"
Venom asked as Izuku entered the gates of UA.
"They weren't putting us threat, were they? Do we need to fight them?"
"No, it's not that. I just got nervous is all. I'm not too used to having microphones and cameras shoved in my face like that," Midoriya answered, heading to class while talking to the parasite in his body. The press presented a problem for Aizawa, so he eventually went out to ask the press to stop harassing his students, as it was getting quite bothersome. "I watched the video feeds of yesterday's combat training. Decent work all around. There's no use going over the different results, so let's move on. Our first task will decide your future," Aizawa said, leaving a pause at the end, which gave room for the class to freak out, thinking it would be another quirk assessment test or something. "You all need to pick a class representative," Aizawa announced, stepping off the podium as the students started coming up with their own ways of deciding the class representative. In the meantime, he would take a nap. At the end of the class representative ended up being Yaomomo with 3 votes, with Izuku getting the vice representative position with 2 votes. After the class representative was elected, the period came to an end and the students went to the cafeteria in order to eat lunch. Izuku sat with both Ida and Ochako, chatting with them while they ate. The conversation started with the students discussing the events of the small election that had just been held. Uraraka told them that she voted for Izuku, after which Ida revealed that he almost voted for him too, but ended up choosing Yaoyorozu. Prompted by Uraraka, the conversation then shifted and the students started talking about heroes in Ida's family. They didn't get very far as the conversation was interrupted halfway through. Warning, Level 3 security breach. Please exit the building in an orderly fashion, the PA system announced, causing most students to break into a panic. After all, nothing like this had happened in years. What does that mean? Ida asked, stopping an older-looking student to ask. It means that someone has managed to get past the school's barriers. This hasn't happened in my 3 years here. We should get going, the student said, panicking while running forward. This was bad news. He was understandably scared. Understanding the situation better, Izuku, Uraraka, and Ida rushed to the exit, getting caught in a huge crowd on the way out.
This must be very uncomfortable,
Venom commented as Izuku and Ida were squished against the wall. Yes, it really is, Izuku responded, observing the outside. He saw the members of the press barraging his teachers, having gotten all the way to the entrance of the main building. Seeing that scene unfolding, Izuku put the pieces together in his head. Hey V, remember yesterday during the battle when we stuck to the wall? Izuku asked, thinking of a way to get everyone's attention.
I think I know what you have in mind,
Venom said, manifesting himself in the boy's hands. Izuku stretched his hands above him and used them to climb up the wall. He now had a proper way of moving around, but he still needed to get everyone's attention if he wanted to stop this. He extended a tendril forward and used it to swing until he reached the hall's exit, landing on the wall. Hey everyone! He shouted at the top of his lungs, wanting to get everyone's attention. Once all the eyes were on him, his nerves got the better of him and he froze up.
Izuku. You should probably warn them,
Venom said.
You know, about the press outside.
Right. Everyone, there's nothing to worry about. It's just the press that got into the school. There's no actual danger. Please calm down. Moments later, the police arrived and the state of panic started to vanish. The situation being taken care of, Izuku, regrouped with his friends, returned to class shortly after. So the next period of class started without any issues, and the students of Class 1A proceeded to pick the rest of their student class government. After deciding on everyone's roles, the students headed home for the day. The next day, the classes went by like normal, until 5th period, when Aizawa informed the class of the special training they'd be conducting. What kind of training will this be? Zero asked curiously, but in truth he was just voicing what the whole class was thinking. Rescue, Aizawa answered while holding up a small sign that read the same thing. We'll be dealing with natural disasters, shipwrecks, stuff like that. Hearing that, Izuku's face lit up like a candle. This was the reason why he wanted to be a hero, to help people. This training would help with that. Aizawa then presented the students with their costumes, telling them that they could wear whatever they wanted. Excited about the whole situation, everyone picked to go with their costumes, and the class then headed to the off-campus facility. After a 15-minute bus ride, the students arrived at their destination, where they met the Space Hero 13 who greeted them. It's the Space Hero 13, the chivalrous bro who has rescued a ton of people from disasters across the world, Midoriya said, marveling at the hero.
Has she actually been to space?
Venom asked. I don't think so, Midoriya answered in his head, doubting his own answer. I think it's just because of the aesthetic. 13's one of my favorite heroes, Uraraka stated, prompting Izuku to talk to her about the hero for a bit. I can't wait to show you what's inside, 13 said, inviting the students in. She started presenting the facility to them, explaining what it's for and talking about the danger of quirks in general. Right, now that that's over, Aizawa stated, wanting to get the exercise done with. They were one staff member short, and the sooner they got started, the better. A stream of electricity then started flowing through the facility, causing the lights to flicker and the electronic communications to fail. It was a sudden development that surprised the students and even the teachers. A portal manifested in the center plaza with a man covered in hands stepping out, followed by a large humanoid monster. This monster had his brain exposed to the air and was covered in some sort of silver, gray, and red goop. What the hell is that thing? Is this part of the training? I thought we were rescuing people, Kirishima exclaimed, surprise overtaking him. That monster was almost as scary as the one he had encountered some time ago.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Venom commented, seeing Riot there. One of his fellow symbiotes couldn't be a good sign. Without Midoriya thinking about it, the mask manifested around his face. It was Venom's instinct. If he had to fight another symbiote head-on, he was sure to lose. More portals open up across the facility, with multiple villains stepping out of them. Once all the guests had arrived, the main portal in the center manifested eyes and took a humanoid form. "Stay back!" Aizawa shouted while putting on his goggles. "This is real. Those are villains." He was frightening the class, but it was a necessary thing. They had to be ready for the situation they were now facing, even if it was sudden. All the while, the villains analyzed them, picking the best course of action. After taking a moment to analyze the situation carefully, Aizawa left the students in 13's care and jumped into the battlefield to act as a distraction. He knew he wouldn't last long, but he could buy time for his students to escape and call for help.
I guess I underestimated him. He's holding his own pretty well.
Midoriya said to himself while observing the fight.
We need to leave. Danger. We need to leave now, Midoriya.
Venom said, a hint of fear in his voice.
Right.
Midoriya said, snapping out of thought and running behind his classmates, catching up rather quickly. They were halfway to the exit when a misty villain suddenly appeared before them, blocking their path. "There is no escape," the villain stated. "It's a pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we have decided to invite ourselves into this haven of justice to say hello. And besides, isn't this a fitting place for All Might, the symbol of peace, to take his last breath? I believe he was supposed to be here today, yet I see no sign of him. There must have been some sort of change of plans we could not have foreseen. Ah well, in the end, I suppose it doesn't matter. I still have a role to play." After the monologue finished, 13 tried to unleash the attack she had been preparing while the enemy talked. Before she could launch the attack, Kirishima and Bakugo jumped at the misty villain. Bakugo launched an explosion which created a smoke screen. "Did you really think we were going to just stand around and let you tear this place to shreds?" Kirishima asked, thinking they had just beaten the villain. "You live up to your school's reputation. But you should be more careful, children. Otherwise, someone might get hurt. My companions will take care of you," the villain said while extending his body to cover the group of students. He manifested a number of portals that ended up swallowing the students, scattering them through the facility. He intended to scatter all of them, but some students might just slip through the cracks. Midoriya had closed his eyes and braced himself for impact, thinking it was going to be a blunt attack. But after not feeling an attack, he opened them back up. He was now above a huge body of water, falling rather quickly. He had no idea how he had gotten there, but he could probably theorize about it. Knowing how to minimize the damage taken, Izuku maneuvered in the air, falling heels first in the water, breaking the tension before his whole body was submerged. Being underwater was a weird sensation Izuku hadn't felt in a while, at least not to this extent. He had never been fully submerged with Venom on him. This must be the flood zone that 13 mentioned, he thought, analyzing his surroundings, but he couldn't see very clearly in the water. "Water mode," he ordered as the memory of making the suit came flashing back.
"Food. I'm hungry,"
Venom said right after they finished making Izuku's costume design. He made Izuku's stomach grumble, an action he knew that would make him go get food. "Ah, fine," Midoriya responded, putting all the forms for the suit together, effectively getting them ready to send in, going to the kitchen afterwards to eat. He strolled into the kitchen and opened a cabinet, still thinking about his suit design. He was acting almost on autopilot. He grabbed a plate, a piece of raw meat from the kitchen, some chocolate, and a couple other snacks. He then grabbed a glass, filled it with water. "Wait, water!" he exclaimed as the realization hit him. "Is everything alright, sweetie?" Inko asked, hearing a commotion. "Everything's fine, Mom," Midoriya answered, giving her a smile. "Just getting a snack." That's an awful lot of food for just a snack, Shui replied while walking away. I'm pretty hungry, Izuku responded before she went out of earshot.
She's starting to get annoying,
Venom stated. Don't mind her too much. There's a bigger concern right now, Midoriya stated in his mind, taking his food back to his room.
which is,
Venom asked, not knowing where his partner was going.
are we under attack?
No, Midoriya responded. It's about the suit. Shouldn't we consider alternate environments? What if we're suddenly stuck underwater or falling from the sky?
I can adapt to fit the necessary scenario,
Venom answered. He hadn't considered it a problem because it wasn't one for him. As long as he had a host, they'd both be able to survive any environment. Still, asking for raw materials for you to use to move or work in different environments might be a cool idea, Midoriya stated, writing down a couple more requests on his form. In present day, Izuku's suit started to shift. The shoes morphed, adapting into fins. The mask on his head changed. The bunny ears shrank while the mask covered his whole head. On his back, 2 tanks surfaced while his hands manifested webbing to move better across the water, and glasses moved up to his face to make his vision underwater clearer.
got you covered.
Venom responded.
By the way, behind you.
Izuku turned around to spot a shark-type villain come charging at him. The villain opened his mouth, ready to bite into Midoriya, but Midoriya maneuvered quickly in the water, changing positions with the villain. He manifested a group of tendrils which he shot at the villain. The first one impaled him in the arm, but the others bound him up. The impaling was Venom's doing, but Izuku managed to get the control to just capture him. Izuku then spotted Tsuyu swimming by, and he decided to follow, dragging the captured villain behind him. Once he reached the boat, he climbed onto it, throwing the villain on top of the boat. A villain! Mineta stated, scared, almost pooping his pants. But once Midoriya jumped on board, he realized what was going on. You bastard! You stabbed me! The villain shouted, lunging at Midoriya again. A smile appeared amidst the suit. Venom could kinda let loose. He manifested his tendrils and pushed the villain against the wall, sticking him there, even restraining his mouth with the black goop so he couldn't call for help. Glad you had that under control, Midoriya. Ribbit. It would have been slightly harder to bring both of you on board, Tsuyu said, glad that her classmate could hold his own. Thanks, Asui, Izuku said as the suit morphed back into his land counterpart and the mask peeled off, revealing his actual face. Call me Tsuyu, Asui said, but we don't seem to be out of the woods. This is turning out to be a pretty bad day of class. You're totally right, Tsuyu. To be honest, that thing the Misty villain said has me pretty worried. They seem to know our whole schedule. They even knew that All Might was supposed to be here, which means they got into the school's files. They most likely got in yesterday, while the teachers were busy dealing with the press, Midoriya reasoned, taking an overview of all the recent events.
That still doesn't explain what their objective is, or what? It doesn't explain what their objective is,
Venom added. That smoke guy said they want to kill All Might. Does that mean that's why they're here? Mineta asked, afraid of the answer. It can't be, right? They couldn't beat All Might. There's just no way. Once he shows up, he'll beat them into the ground. They must have figured out some way, Ribbit. Otherwise, why come here just to get caught? Tsuyu asked.
That Glenn, that monster is likely what they intend to use to kill him,
Venom said, bringing the memories of the monster to Midoriya's mind. They likely intend to use the monster to kill him. You know, the big one with the silvery thing on him? The thing is, even if All Might does show up, we might not be in the clear. We don't know if we'll hold on till then, Midoriya reasoned. But we're acting entirely on hypothesis here. There's not much else we can do, Mineta said, having already forgotten about the villain Midoriya brought on board. What about asking him? Tsuyu asked, pointing at the villain that was still stuck to the wall, trying to wiggle out. Midoriya extended his tendrils to the mouth, reabsorbing the gag he put on the villain. Ha! You think I'll tell you anything, you stupid brats? You're dead wrong. I'll kill you, he shouted as soon as he could. What do we do now? Mineta asked worriedly. The goop started overtaking Midoriya's face once more, leaving the gas mask down this time.
You don't want to talk? Then fine. There are ways to make you talk,
he said, tendrils coming out of his back and forming into small blades as a tongue came out, salivating all over the villain. This sudden shift in personality managed to scare even the two students that were with him. Meanwhile, at the entrance, the students who managed to escape Kurogiri's portals discussed their best course of action. Thanks to Shoji, they had already figured out that their classmates were fine. They had just been scattered throughout the facility. They planned a proper strategy, one that would allow them to call for help. After everyone was ready, they set it into motion. 13 used her quirk to momentarily stop Black Mist, allowing Ida the opportunity to run and get reinforcements. 13's gamble failed and the villain managed to overpower her, but thanks to the help of the other students, Ida managed to escape the USJ and ran towards the school's main building in order to call for reinforcements.
What a wimp,
Venom commented after the water villain spilled his guts. They had barely done anything. All they really did was lick him. The villain was bleeding, but it was only in self-defense from before. All it really took for him to reveal their whole plan was lick him and threaten to do some more damage. Still, he had served his purpose, so Midoriya bound him and gagged him back up. So they do plan on killing All Might. What do we do now? Mineta asked. The situation was scary, but he had to endure it if he wanted to get out alive. We're still surrounded by villains. Even knowing this information, there's no way we can relay it. Tsuyu reasoned. That is true, but they seem to have made one crucial mistake, one that gives us the advantage, Midoriya stated, his mask back off. And what would that be? Mineta asked. They brought me and Asui here, Midoriya answered. What does that have to do with anything? Mineta asked. We know they knew of the facility on schedule, but this means they didn't know what students they were dealing with or what our quirks would be. If they knew, then Tsuyu and I would likely be in the burning zone, where we'd be easier to defeat, Midoriya explained, elaborating on his reasoning. Hey V, that camouflage we used during the combat training, any chance we can adapt it to steal someone's look? Midoriya asked in his head.
You mean to pretend to be him, right? That's possible,
Venom answered. Alright, I have a plan, Midoriya stated, proceeding to tell his classmates his plan before putting it into motion. Ah! A scream was heard from the bar as the villain they had captured jumped off of it, his mouth covered in blood. Finally, it was getting boring. I was even starting to worry that these students would be a challenge, another villain said. He seemed to be higher in the chain of command. They have me for a moment, but they have very little resolve. Doubt they are very strong, the villain that escaped said. Right, then let's get this started, the second villain said, turning to the boat ready to attack. The first villain, seeing his opportunity, struck, biting into the other villain's arm. What the hell? He shouted as he put his arm to his other arm, trying to stop the bleeding. Why did you do that, you no-good traitor?
no,
The first villain shouted before he started to morph, revealing Izuku in his water suit. Right, Ribbit, Tsuyu Mineta responded as she jumped into the water to assist Midoriya, and Mineta threw the balls from his head into the water, just as Midoriya had told him to. You think you're going to beat us that easily? Another villain asked, trying to ambush Midoriya, but he reacted quickly, grabbing a small knife from a holster in his right leg. Venom quickly overtook it, turning the little knife into a sword, which he used to hit the villain in retaliation. Midoriya extended multiple tentacles throughout the water, grabbing onto Mineta's balls and moving them around, sticking them to the villains. After, he and Tsuyu went around kicking the villains into each other, making sure they would lose more and more mobility until all of them were incapacitated, stuck to the hull of the ship. Before you even say it, I know what you're going to say. Hungry. I know, okay, so give me a minute. Izuku said in his head, grabbing a power bar and eating it.
Thanks,
Venom said. They had just used a lot of strength, which meant they needed to replenish it. The villains incapacitated, the students headed to the shore, wanting to pass on what they had learned and maybe even help out if they could. The 3 students arrived from the shipwreck zone. They kept a low profile, hiding while observing the situation. They watched as the villain, covered in hands only known by the name of Shigaraki, studied Aizawa's movements, figuring out his fighting style and pattern. Once he had a good sense of the situation, he jumped in, facing the teacher himself. Aizawa tried to attack who he perceived to be the leader, but Shigaraki managed to block the blow, decaying the hero's elbow. He then stepped back and allowed his lackeys to finish off the hero, but he still held his own. "He's all yours, Riot," Shigaraki said, angry at the incompetence of his own forces. If they managed to escape, he'd likely end up killing them.
"Very nice action,"
he complained. He rushed at Aizawa at high speeds. Aizawa saw him coming and tried deleting the monster's power, but nothing happened. The villain still approached. Aizawa jumped back, trying to evade the attack, but the big villain grabbed him by the leg and slammed him against the ground. "What? I raised his quirk. How is it that he's still so strong?" he thought as he flinched from the pain. Blood was already dripping down his forehead. It was likely that his skull had been fractured.
"It's not going to be easy to get away from me,"
Riot said, a look of joy on his face.
"I finally have a toy to play with, and you bet I'm going to enjoy it."
"Oh my god, Mr. Aizawa," Tsuyu whispered, terrified at what was happening, as Izuku was staring in disbelief and Mineta was holding his mouth shut, trying not to scream in terror. Riot then bit into Aizawa's arm, ripping it off with one swift motion. "Ah!" Aizawa screamed in agony as the pain overwhelmed him.
"Such a nice scream,"
Riot said as he started gnawing on the arm. He'd only been on the planet for very little time, but with the way humans were always acting, this was like music to his ears. Plus it was revenge for all the tests, so that was another aspect to enjoy. Knowing he failed to stop the students from escaping, Kurogiri left those at the entrance alone, teleporting to his master's side. "Kurogiri, is 13 dead?" Shigaraki asked. "She's incapacitated, but unfortunately there were some students I did not manage to scatter, and one of them got away," he informed as Riot savored the arm he was eating, like a dog enjoying a bone he had been given. The cloth of the sleeve fell from the arm as Riot kept eating. Shigaraki threw a fit after hearing this. If the heroes were coming, then there was no point in staying. Retreating was their best option, but he didn't want to leave without completing any of their objectives. Although, killing a hero would be enough. Blood was gushing from Aizawa's arm, so he grabbed the cloth, using it to at least try to stop the bleeding. "Wow, you really are cool, aren't you, Eraserhead?" Shigaraki said, a twisted smile on his face as he approached the hero. "You lose an arm and even that doesn't slow you down. Just fix the problem and get right to the problem at hand. Still, that doesn't mean I'll let you live." "Mr. Aizawa!" the 3 students shouted, terrified for their teacher's life as Shigaraki walked to him. Tsuyu and Midoriya leapt at him, wanting to help. Mineta on instinct threw a ball. It landed right where Shigaraki was going to take his next step, stopping him in place. "What? What is this?" Shigaraki wondered, outraged. He couldn't take a step forward. He was essentially stuck and couldn't reach Aizawa from that position. Before Shigaraki could get mad or even give an order against the students, a loud crash was heard, one that emanated from the facility's entrance. Out of the dust cloud created, All Might stepped out, calming the students in the vicinity and putting them at ease. "Have no fear, students. I am here," he said, a stern expression on his face. "Ah, seems like the final boss has been unlocked," Shigaraki stated, excited. He was finally going to get his chance to kill All Might and watch society crumble as a result. After assessing the situation and explaining the events that led him there, All Might rushed at the villains in the facility, taking down all the small fries in one fell swoop before moving Aizawa to safety. He had clearly been beaten up very badly and was struggling just to stay conscious. Adrenaline was coursing through his veins, dulling out the pain and keeping him awake, but once that passed, he'd likely fall unconscious. They needed to get help and quickly. "I'm sorry, Aizawa. I should have been here," he whispered, ashamed of how his irresponsibility led to this moment. He couldn't find a worthy successor and he still continued as if nothing was wrong. He had to make it up to his fellow hero.
"So my main opponent has finally shown up,"
Riot said, standing up to face All Might, spitting the bones he was chewing out of his mouth. At great speeds, All Might rushed in again. He made sure to move Mineta, Asui, and Midoriya out of the way. Their safety was his priority after all, but he also tried to strike at Shigaraki, but Riot was able to shield his boss easily. "Everyone back to the entrance, and take Aizawa with you. He doesn't have much time," All Might ordered as he got ready to fight the enemies in front of him. The students grabbed onto Aizawa and started moving as Shigaraki reached to his foot and placed his hand on the ball. It decayed quickly, freeing Shigaraki. All Might then rushed at the villains, but Riot got in the way. His host's main purpose was protecting the stupid boy with the hands, and the programming placed on him was extremely strong. He couldn't override it. It kinda overrode him a bit. Izuku walked away, carrying Aizawa along with Tsuyu and Mineta.
"You have to go back. You can't beat him alone,"
Venom informed. He had been pondering what he should do for a while. Eventually, he reached the conclusion that he couldn't let Izuku's favorite hero die, so he spoke up. "You've been unusually quiet," Izuku noted in his head. "Don't worry, this is All Might we're talking about. He'll take care of the villain in no time flat."
"You don't understand,"
Venom pleaded. He deliberated if he should say anything. He eventually reached the conclusion that this was the right thing to do.
"And that monster is another Clintar."
"What?" Izuku exclaimed out loud, turning around to face the battlefield. The battle had just started, but All Might already seemed to be on the losing side. "Take care of Mr. Aizawa," he told his classmates as he ran back into the battlefield. All Might kept attacking. First a Texas smash, then a Carolina smash. He landed some attacks which his opponent just took as if they were nothing. Others he dodged. His opponent just seemed to be toying with him, analyzing his movements before he would bring on the pain. Midoriya rushed to the battlefield, pulling out his knife and manifesting his sword. Seeing him coming, Kurogiri opened a portal, wanting to send him to another part of the facility. But before Midoriya was caught up in it, Baku came out of nowhere, hitting Kurogiri with a giant explosion. "Get out of the way, Deku!" he shouted. At the same time, Todoroki appeared, freezing Riot in place, which allowed All Might to smash him into the ground. Todoroki froze him over while Kirishima rushed at Shigaraki, trying to hit him, but Shigaraki dodged. Izuku followed up, managing to make a small cut on Shigaraki's cheek, but little else. "So, I heard you came here to kill the symbol of peace, but scum like you could never kill All Might," Todoroki said, smugly thinking the tables had turned. "Crap, we almost had him," Kirishima said.
"Next time,"
Midoriya assured, his full costume on.
"Another Clintar,"
Riot said, savoring the moment.
"This is going to be fun."
"This isn't good," Shigaraki said, taking a good look at the situation he now found himself in. "You pinned down our only way out. Riot, take down the brat. We need to get out of here." Following those orders, Riot broke the ice he was frozen in and rushed at the boy. All Might jumped in the way, blocking the punch. "If things keep on like this, we'll end up losing," Midoriya thought to himself.
"Riot, only nothing as a Clintar. Think about that,"
Venom suggested. "Right. Bakugo's our best bet," Midoriya said, seeing where Venom was going. He used his tendrils to grab onto Kurogiri, keeping him restrained. "What the hell are you doing, nerd?" Bakugo shouted, annoyed that Izuku would try and take the villain from him.
"Bakugo, you're the only one who can reconnect them with your explosions.
I'll take care of the warp guy. You have a more important job to do," Midoriya said, taking off his mask to show Bakugo how serious he was. "Whatever," he said, getting back up and ready to face his new enemy. "What are you doing? Just free Kurogiri!" Shigaraki ordered.
"Right. On it."
Riot answered, but before he could take his next step, Bakugo rushed at him, pulling the pin from his gauntlets and unleashing a huge explosion that knocked the villain back slightly. Once the smoke cleared, Bakugo could see the attack had made an effect. The silver substance had been removed from part of his body, but it didn't seem like it did much damage. He pointed his second gauntlet at him and with a smile unleashed a second explosion. He knew that the monster would evade, so he pointed the attack at his master, so the monster would be forced to block.
"That hurt, you damn brat!"
Riot screamed. Before the dust of the attack could even settle, he rushed at Bakugo, punching him 3 times with as much strength as he could. One on his left arm, the second on the right arm, and the third punch in the gut. The blows had enough force to break the gauntlets and send Bakugo crashing headfirst into the ground, a good 29 meters away.
"Now on to you,"
he said, looking at Midoriya.
"You won't get away from me, you Venom. Not after all the trouble you've caused."
He rushed at Midoriya again, but Kirishima jumped in the way, wanting to help his friend. He stopped the attack, but even hardening as much as he could, he was sent flying back, a couple shards coming out of him.
"Stop getting in my way, damn it!"
Riot screamed, frustrated. The battle was amusing at first, but this point was getting tedious. If it went on for too long, he'd run out of fuel and his host's regeneration wouldn't be able to keep up. "That's not an option for us," Todoroki said, freezing Riot in place. He easily broke out and started walking towards Todoroki.
"You think that beautiful attack will stop me?" he
said, murderous intent visible on his face. He was way too enraged. All Might could do at this point was stare. He had reached his limit and couldn't keep fighting anymore. Thoughts raced into his mind as he thought this would be his final resting place. As Riot slowly approached Todoroki, a switch just flipped inside of him. He had seen the monster act negatively to the heat and flames from Bakugo's explosion. He didn't want to use it. He promised he wouldn't use it in battle, but it was do or die time. Would he really give his own life just to spite his father? Riot got closer and his survival instincts kicked in. He was paralyzed in fear, but a wall of flames erupted from the left side of his body as tears started sliding down his face and different memories flooded into his head. Riot screamed in pain and took a step back. Venom was a bit away, so he couldn't really feel it. Still, Riot and Shigaraki held the advantage. Something had to be done.
"I'm sorry about this, Izuku,"
Venom said. "Sorry about what?" Midoriya asked in his head as Venom started leaving Izuku's body, slithering to the best closest host. Seeing his opportunity as the boy who was restraining him had been weakened, Kurogiri overpowered the boy, throwing him back. "I'm sorry about this, Tomura Shigaraki," Kurogiri said, grabbing onto his master and teleporting him away forcibly, returning to the bar. Shigaraki's safety was his priority, even if it went against his wishes. "Damn it, Kurogiri! We almost had him!" Shigaraki said, slamming his hand against the ground. In the USJ, Riot screeched, taking a step back from the fire as Venom slithered towards All Might, overtaking his body. All Might was just standing still, observing the battlefield. He saw as Riot was getting separated from Nomu, taking steps back to try and maintain the bond, as Nomu, on instinct, was rejecting the symbiote. All Might blinked and suddenly the battlefield wasn't there anymore. He looked to his left and saw his master there. When he blinked again, he was back in the battlefield, now covered in a black substance that was morphing to reflect his hero suit. He felt strangely energized and as strong as he had been in his prime. Riot had finally taken control again and got ready to take on the fire user, but as he tackled Todoroki, he was blocked by All Might, who punched Riot away.
"Oh, you made a new friend,"
Riot said, almost nothing but rage in his voice.
"How annoying."
"Todoroki, stop using your flames," Midoriya ordered. He knew that it'd only weaken All Might at this point and put them at an even playing field, which would take away the advantage they had. Todoroki snapped out of his recollections, looked at his hands. He was using it without really realizing it. He knew Midoriya had a reason for the request, so he obliged. Riot leapt at All Might, manifesting tendrils to try and impale him. Venom gave All Might his own energy, as they needed all the energy possible to survive. He was even healing All Might in order for them to survive the encounter, but All Might was the one who had the reins. For a moment, Venom let his consciousness drift into All Might's subconscious. He was suddenly in a barren wasteland. All Might was in the front of him, but didn't seem to be aware as to what was going on there. Around him were 6 other people he didn't know. He turned around to see a pale man with white hair. "You don't belong here," he said. "You aren't worthy." In the blink of an eye, he was back in the battlefield just as All Might delivered a consecutive 120 attacks, sending Riot flying into the sky with the last one. It was a combination of multiple factors, but they had managed to defeat the villain in the end. Weakened by the encounter, but still freshly energized, All Might fell into a sitting position, as Venom left his body and returned to Midoriya. "Thank you for lending me your strength, young Midoriya. Young Todoroki. All of you," he said while thinking. "Pathetic. I had to be saved by my students. I should have been able to defeat him even without their help." Seconds after, the UA staff arrived at the scene and started defeating and apprehending the villains. The police and ambulances arrived shortly after. The students had survived and justice had triumphed, but at what cost? And that's the end of the video. Well, yes, it's the end of the main video, but please don't click away since a lot of people leave at this point. It's time for my ranting. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did, subscribe, and check out my Discord. That said, I hope you really enjoyed it, and sorry it's so long. That wasn't really the plan. I thought it would only be like 20 minutes, but then while doing the script, I just had so many cool ideas. Hope Aizawa losing his arm wasn't too strong or too thing. I hope that scene ended up well, and so the scene with Venom entering the vestiges as well. The Aizawa scene was either, I thought Riot would be a lot more savage than just Nomu, so I thought either rip the arm off or kill him. And I wasn't sure of what to do there. Yeah. So this is where we are at this point. From here on out, things are going to go very differently from the We the Celestials version, as I didn't really keep up with that one. I only kept up with them for as long as I wrote them, and I hope that my future parts are also enjoyable. That said, if you want the next parts, 100 likes to show your support. Until next time, everyone. Since the video is so long, I don't want to keep the outro too long. So until next time, everyone, have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye!